Chapter 7. Jindabyne, Gabbie, and the noise in my head. July 2024 did not feel like grief. It felt like a long, grinding argument inside my head. Tony had only just died in June, but what survives from the next month is not the image of a cousin I loved. It is my own voice, running hot, trying to win a case. The inner temperature is high and unstable, but the surface is full of ultimatums, verdicts, and plans. On the morning of 4th July 2024, I recorded a voice memo on my phone that I named "The Joy of My Dad Dies." I am circling a forbidden thought that has been with me for years, that the idea of my father dying brings not horror, but relief. In the recording, I describe it almost clinically, how much calmer things would be, how many problems would evaporate, how the family would finally be free of his addictions and schemes. There is no room for ambivalence. I am furious, certain, convinced that I am naming a hard truth no one else will say out loud. On the mood chart I use now to track my bipolarity, this sits at an 8, high in the agitated, angry band. It isn't just anger, it is hyper-arousal. My thoughts are racing so fast I can barely catch them. My sleep has shrunk to 4 hours a night, and my behavior is goal-driven but erratic. I am not just upset, I am vibrating. From there, the month opens out into a whole constellation of outputs. Around the same week, I start uploading a daily run of Andrew's Clubhouse episodes. The titles say everything about where my mind is. Festering Pride, the story of my father. Sorry, Nana. Auntie Rosa is the worst. I don't love you, Dad. Every molehill is a mountain. Cocaine is not medicine. Each video is really a cleaned-up version of the same ranting inner monologue. I sit in front of the camera and deliver speeches about our history, blaming and explaining in the same breath. One moment I'm tracing my father's wounded pride and humiliation, turning him into a tragic figure. The next I'm tearing into him as a selfish junkie who ruined everyone's life. I apologize to my grandmother, while also using her as a prop. I drag my aunt. I sermonize about drugs and morality. It is all performance, but it is also genuine pain. The line between confession and prosecution has already blurred. Looking back from recovery, I can see how distorted those portrayals of my father were. The word junkie was a deliberate cruelty, not an accurate description. It was me poking an old wound I knew he was ashamed of, weaponizing past struggles with substances that he had already moved beyond. The reality is more ordinary and more complicated. He provided the deposit and paid the mortgage in full. It was generous of him to put me on the title at all, to give me a stake in something he had largely funded. In July, I could barely acknowledge that. I selected all the worst memories and built my father out of them, then broadcast that caricature to anyone who would watch or listen. I feel a deep, specific guilt about that now. Under the guise of telling the truth, I was hurting him in exactly the way I knew would cut the deepest. The YouTube episodes don't just live online. I am piping them straight into my relationships. In the family WhatsApp threads, I forward links and screenshots, send long paragraphs about Auto Street, the trusts, the loans, the corruption. I drop them into the Flight Team Alpha group as if I'm briefing a panel of allies. To Mum, to Nana, to cousins, I keep saying some version of, "This is serious. People need to know what's going on." I threaten posters all over Greenacre if my father doesn't sign things the way I want. Even when the messages look practical, updates about addresses, lenders, paperwork, the emotional tone is the same. Urgent, pressured, convinced that I alone see the stakes clearly. On 10 July, the letter of demand lands. It formalizes everything I've been anxious about into legal language. Breaches of trust, dissipation of funds, the suggestion that insurers and regulators may need to be notified. My nervous system takes that letter as proof that the nightmare in my head is real. Within days, the recordings sharpen. In one long memo, I rail against my father as a criminal, declare that Auto Street will not be sold over my dead body, and speak as if every decision he has ever made has been part of a long con. In another, I talk through each relative like a spreadsheet. Who knew what? Who looked away? Who is soft? Who is a wolf? I jump from rent schedules and loan amounts to childhood slights without any transition, as if they belong on the same ledger. The mood sits in that same high band, angry, sleepless, ready to fight everyone at once. Religion folds into the mix almost automatically. In the videos, Christian Lives Matter is better than nothing, and Christ in the desert. I use the language of faith to prop up my case. I criticize movements in the church while holding myself out as someone who understands the real Christ. In an audio titled, "My Family Are Bad Maronites," I turn crosses, statues, and rituals into exhibits of moral failure. The sacramental world that once comforted me becomes more evidence in my file. They go to Mass, but look at what they're doing behind the scenes. Theology slides into strategy. All of this is happening at the same time as the more private voice memos. The difference is only the audience. When I speak into my phone alone, I let the anger get uglier. Talking about relief at my father's death, fantasizing about the day the family will finally see what I see. When I speak to the camera on YouTube, I trim the language slightly, dress it up with philosophical references, Kant, the categorical imperative, righteous anger. The core message does not change. The civil knot around Auto Street, the trusts, and my father's behavior has taken over my mental field. Tony's death sits underneath it like a pressure front, hardly named, but driving the weather. Midway through the month, the same state spills out of the narrow family channel and into what I think of as my business identity. I arrange a lunch with my cousin Zuzu at Darling Harbor. In my mind, it's a business lunch. In reality, it's a cousin taking me out for seafood and a drink, trying to talk and understand. I order a non-alcoholic cocktail. I haven't been drinking at all. Alcohol dropped out of my life long before this. The energy that keeps me moving and talking is not caffeine or booze. It is mania itself, this unearned, sleepless current that has been running through me for months. I set my phone down between us and let it run as we eat. The file I create that day later ends up on YouTube, but in that moment, I'm recording mostly for myself. On the surface, I am walking Zuzu through Auto Street, the trusts, the letter of demand, my view of what each uncle has done wrong. Underneath, the real message is simple and much more vulnerable. Tell me I'm not crazy. Tell me someone sees how hard this has been. I am incapable of saying that directly, so I wrap it in numbers and accusations and call it work. Listening back now, the shape of that lunch is obvious. I control the conversation. Whenever Zuzu tries to soften a point or shift towards relationship, I drag us back to evidence. I talk over him. I swing between charm and contempt. The recording captures the same pattern as the July videos and WhatsApp messages. I am willing to explode my relationships in order to force acknowledgement of my pain. I think I am being brave and honest. In practice, I am pushing away the very people I am desperate not to lose. Running alongside all this are the quieter outputs that barely registered to me at the time. Short videos with my own music over cycling footage through Mort's estate, or a still image with a gentle instrumental track called Follow the Sun. These aren't rants. They don't name anyone. They are little pockets of light created by the same agitated hands that are typing out threats and accusations. I haven't had a drink in years. The buzz in those clips is not alcohol, but untreated mania, pushed into melody and movement. At Mort's estate, I stayed with Uncle Zuzu, my father's brother, the only uncle who would pick up the phone and let me talk, the one I felt I could still lean on, and later, even he would become a target for my rage. In those nights, I am slowly teaching myself how to make sounds that comfort me, building simple tracks and then laying them over the troubling mess I am filming and living in. The same nervous system that is producing ugly, wounding speech is also producing something strangely beautiful. The imagination turns outward to mountains, roads, sky, trying to find harmony, even as my words keep turning inward on my family like a knife. What ties all this early July material together is not any single speech, but the way the themes repeat and loop. Father, Auto Street, betrayal, righteousness, across every medium I touch. Phone memos, YouTube episodes, chat messages, emails, they are all different surfaces of the same inner knot. When my psychologist and I later lay the mood chart over this period, the pattern is clear. I am sitting in the high, dysregulated band for weeks at a time, with no real dips into rest or simple sadness. There is fury, certainty, and a kind of cold euphoria, but very little grief. Tony is barely mentioned in these recordings, yet his absence is everywhere. I was not at his bedside when he died. I couldn't bear to be there, and the family dynamics by that point made it impossible. Part of me felt I had forfeited the right. The helplessness of that reality, knowing my cousin was dying and that I could not even stand in the doorway, was intolerable. Instead of sitting with that helplessness, I dragged my gaze sideways to my father and the civil mess. It was easier to fight over Auto Street than to admit I hadn't been able to say goodbye. It was easier to accuse everyone of cowardice than to face my own absence. From the distance of recovery, July 2024 looks less like a month of clear-eyed truth-telling and more like a siege. I am besieging my relatives with links and monologues, besieging my own nervous system with THC and all-night editing sessions. The voice memos, videos, and chats feel at the time like a mission from God and a civic duty. Underneath, they are my way of avoiding the simple, unbearable fact that Tony is gone, that I could not stand next to his bed when he left, and that my father, flawed, wounded, generous, infuriating, is a human being I love, not the cartoon villain I turned him into on camera. The noise in my head. Freddie is born on July 30th, late that winter. There is a photo of me in the hospital, shirt off, his tiny body pressed against my chest, my face doing the full, proud dad smile. It looks warm and uncomplicated. What the photo doesn't show is that I am almost completely absent from myself. I am still inside the July knot. Tony, the letter of demand, my father, the YouTube monologues, the voice memos. I show up for the birth in the way people in a manic episode often do for big family events. Present enough to follow the script, not present enough to actually feel what is happening. I hold my son. I look at him. I know in theory this is important, but my emotional bandwidth is taken up by rage, fear, and the civil map in my head. Most days that month start in the water. I am swimming lengths in whatever pool I can access, using the repetition as a kind of self-imposed physiotherapy for the mind. Stroke, breath, turn. Stroke, breath, turn. From the outside, it looks disciplined and healthy. From the inside, it is driven more by compulsion than by care. If I use the mood chart I work with now, these mornings sit somewhere around a 7. Highly activated, tense, not yet spilling over into full agitation. I am trying to swim my way into a version of myself that can still be a father and a husband, while the rest of the day pulls me back toward the knot. Running alongside that physical routine is the steady output of voice memos and YouTube episodes. The phone recordings are private in form, but not in intention. I speak into the handset as if into a confessional or a witness box, then forward the clips to Flight Team Alpha or individual relatives. One morning, I pace and record a piece I label "The Joy of My Dad Dies." Another time, "The Bile You Put Inside Me." These aren't drafts for the book. They are raw, dysphoric expressions of hurt and fury. On the days when the anger peaks, I am at a level 9, euphoric, aggressive, paranoid, and completely unable to track my own thoughts. The YouTube channel is the public mirror of those memos. I sit in front of the camera and turn the same ideas into long, improvised podcasts. Stories about my father's failures, about church hypocrisy, about the wider Maronite community. Sometimes I give the episodes righteous or theological titles to make them sound more like commentary than a personal howl. Other times I lean into pure confession and accusation. The rhetoric is only slightly toned down compared to what I am saying in private. It is still laced with contempt, wounded pride, and a very brittle sense of justice. I tell myself I am speaking truth, but the truth is saturated with mania. Against this, there is the quieter strand of creative work that doesn't aim to destroy anyone. I keep taking photographs of religious statues, especially the Sacred Heart, framing the burning heart and the flower in the hand as if they might offer some kind of protection or recognition. I developed the Andrews Clubhouse theme song and other musical pieces, teaching myself chords and textures that feel soothing or hopeful. When I sit at the keyboard and build a progression that lands, the internal pressure drops for a moment. For a few minutes, I can breathe, feel beauty, imagine myself as someone who makes something kind. But as soon as I close the laptop or look at my phone, a message, a memory, or a new perceived slight pulls me back up again. My birthday falls in the middle of this. There's a theater ticket to a musical at the Opera House, and a photo of the unopened portable ice bath on the kitchen table, wrapped and presented as a thoughtful gift from my family, an extension of the triathlon training and my fixation on resetting my body. I go to the show. I smile. I say thank you. I tell myself that if I keep playing the part of a normal, grateful adult, the feelings will follow. In reality, I am still mostly numb. The only things that seem to cut through are the moments of making a new musical idea, a clever edit, a line in a voice memo that feels sharp enough to hurt somebody. Around this time, I find a handwritten story my eldest son once dictated with my wife. A silly, playful text about animals and nonsense words. I ask her to send me photos of the pages. In my head, I pictured turning it into a proper children's book, something we could read together, a way of being a writer-father instead of a raging son. But when I sit down to work on it, my mind slides away. The attention that can sustain a 20-minute rant about my father or a fully scored YouTube piece cannot stay with a gentle story written by my child. I save the images and then go back to the Civil War. The war keeps looking for new material. I start making lists in a notebook I carry in the car, a bad list and a good list. On one side go my father, certain uncles, cousins, the men I see as wolves. On the other side, I place the few people I think are on my side, the lawyer, a builder, a cousin who answers the phone. It is a childish taxonomy, but inside the manic logic, it feels like strategy. Each new voice memo or YouTube episode slots people further up or down those columns. This one is corrupt, that one is courageous, that one has become an enemy. I take an old smiling photo of my father in Lebanon and scrawl text across it, labeling him a women and children basher. I share or prepare it as if I am doing a public service announcement, when in fact I am adding another layer of cruelty to a relationship already warped by pain. Not long after, I see new photos of him at a restaurant in the mountains with friends, eating a long, lavish meal. Instead of registering simple relief that he is alive and functioning, I feel a spike of almost jealous rage. He is enjoying himself, untouched by my suffering, unaffected by my blows. That sense of being unseen and unacknowledged becomes fuel for yet another round of messages and recordings, including threats I later have to read back to police and courts. Alongside this, there is the quiet domestic thread that refuses to disappear. There are photos of me on the couch, with all 4 boys, Freddie swaddled in the middle, while the older 3 grin and lean into me. It is the kind of picture people post with captions about gratitude and blessings. For me, it is more complicated. In that moment, I am trying to inhabit the role of father with the same determination I use in the pool. if I hold still long enough, if I give the right smile, if I keep showing up, maybe the feeling will arrive later. Part of why I make music and gentle videos during this period is precisely because I want to feel something good again. Another part of me has become so used to anger, despair, and prosecutorial thinking that those emotions seem like the only honest ones left. Seen from a distance, this stretch of time is not just about making or breaking. It is about living in two incompatible rhythms at once: the rhythm of family, birthdays, newborn skin, children's jokes and swims, and the rhythm of mania, in which every image, every message, and every silence is scanned for evidence. The YouTube episodes, the voice memos, the WhatsApp exchanges, the photos and songs are all attempts to organize that chaos into a story. The tragedy is how often the beauty and tenderness are there in front of me, and yet cannot quite get past the noise in my head. Before Jindabyne, the two Eddies. Before Jindabyne, before the drive down and the cold air and the lake, there is Gabbie appearing quietly in the middle of my manic storm. We don't reconnect through some grand reconciliation. It's smaller and messier than that. I'm running low, mentally and materially. My prescription isn't enough. My sleep is fractured. My thoughts are racing. And the usual cousins I'd lean on for help feel radioactive. Out of everyone, I reach for Gabbie. He doesn't hesitate. He doesn't interrogate me, doesn't shame me, doesn't turn our contact into a lecture. He shows up. The practical help matters, but what actually lands is the way he looks at me. He can see that I'm not okay, that what's coming out of me isn't just anger or arrogance, it's illness. And he treats me accordingly, like someone who is unwell but still worth showing up for. The WhatsApp thread from those weeks is mostly me pushing out links and audio at 5 in the morning, and him answering in images, songs, little acknowledgments, not running away when the volume of my output becomes unreasonable. When I record A Tale of Two Eddies in early June, I think I'm making an essay about family tragedy, but in hindsight, it's also a map of why Gabbie feels so familiar to me. In that piece, I talk about two men named Eddie, my cousin who became a kind of high school saint and later died from a drug overdose, and my brother who tried to protect me from bullies and was then broken by the very family system that was supposed to protect him. The first Eddie, my cousin, is all courage and charisma in my memory. The one who turned up when my brother couldn't face my bullies alone. The one whose death no one wanted to talk about properly. The second Eddie, my brother, is the one I now feel compelled to defend, long after the damage is done. In that recording, I trace how the silence around their pain, the shame around drugs and mental illness, and the violence of uncles and fathers all braid together into something lethal. I am angry, moralizing, sometimes cruel, especially toward my father. And at the time, I imagined that saying these things out loud is finally telling the truth. But beneath the performance, there is a simpler realization. People I loved were allowed to fall apart in public, and the family's response was to look away. Gabbie knew both Eddies. He wasn't some neutral outsider watching my family from afar. He was woven into the same web. He knew my brother well enough to have his own falling out with him. He knew the codes, the silences, the way serious things got buried under jokes and bravado. So when he watches or listens to my piece about the two Eddies, and later tells me in Jindabyne that it made him emotional, it isn't just because the story is sad or well told. It's because he recognizes himself in it. He understands that I'm not just venting. I'm circling the same hole he has been standing next to for years. That's why, when he starts sending me music screenshots and we swap photos of cheap licensed band t-shirts from Kmart, it lands as more than banter. These small exchanges become a language of recognition. He is saying, I see what you're trying to do with all this output. I see that you're clinging to songs and stories because you're trying not to disappear. I'm doing the same thing. By the time we are talking about Jindabyne, I've already decided that the place means something. In my manic logic, the triathlon there, the snow, the lake, and now the fact that Gabbie has an apartment in that town, all fuse into a sign. This must be where I get fixed. If I can just get to Jindabyne with him, something will click and the noise will stop. Underneath that fantasy is a more ordinary hope that being with someone who understands the two eddies, who has been wounded by the same family machine, might quiet me down in a way nothing else has. What actually happens is more complicated. The first night, the bed feels stale and unlived in, and I realize instantly that no place is going to save me overnight. At the time, I take that as proof that Jindabyne isn't a cure at all, just another place I've tried to turn into an answer. But over the days that follow, sitting with Gabbie, hearing him talk about being ripped off by cousins, watching the way he still insists on respecting a father who has done terrible things, I begin to sense something else, a different way of carrying pain that isn't just rage and accusation. The Eddie story I tried to tell on YouTube is suddenly in the room with us, embodied in the man sitting across from me. This is the ground we're standing on when we finally start to talk about the lake, the town, and what it might mean for both of us. Before the water, before the cameras, before the trip as symbol, there is this. Two cousins from the same village, both fluent in the language of addiction, secrecy, and family shame, trying, clumsily, imperfectly, to offer each other something gentler than what they grew up with. Jindabyne, the first morning, and Rye. The first morning in Jindabyne, I wake up in the dark, somewhere around 4. The unit smells like a cupboard that hasn't been opened in months. The mattress feels stale, like someone else's life that's been left on pause. I haven't earned any of the comfort I was hoping this place would give me. I'm wired and hollow at the same time. I don't go looking for Gabbie or Rye. I open my laptop instead. I plug in the little MIDI keyboard I've dragged down here like a life raft and start trying to make sound that feels safe. Simple chords, soft pads, anything that can sit in the air without accusing me of anything. I'm not making music in any grand sense. I'm trying to build a small room I can stand to be in. The notes are the only place in Jindabyne that feels clean. Once the battery on the laptop starts to dip, I move to the next ritual. I take the Tesla out into the dark and go hunting for a charger. While it fills, I fill myself in the only way I know at that point. Drive, smoke. Drive, smoke. I take the same road I rode on the bike months earlier for the triathlon, from the lake up towards Charlotte Pass, looping the corners with that wired, heroic feeling in my chest. It looks like discipline from the outside. Inside, it's closer to running away. By the time I get back, Gabbie is up, and Rye is already in motion. In my mind, Rye is the safe one. My wife's brother, the practical man, the bridge between my collapsing marriage and whatever I'm pretending my new life is going to be. Long before Jindabyne, he has been quietly holding pieces of me together, transferring money when I'm in trouble, meeting me at the pool, getting in the ocean with me at Clovelly in the dark when no one else would, dragging me to the sauna and ice bath at Nature's Energy in Glebe, and insisting that I eat properly afterwards. He knows about panic, about depression, about not wanting to be here. We have compared notes on that more than once. In a different way to Gabbie, he's one of the few men in my life who has tried to look after my body and my mind at the same time. We meet at a cafe for breakfast. He jokes, he asks questions, he watches me. At some point, he suggests we go down to the water and jump in naked, like it's a harmless bit of fun. I flinch so hard at the idea that he looks surprised. What he doesn't know is that he's remembering a version of me I've been trying to outrun. Years earlier, at the Tauk picnic, about 5 years before Jindabyne, my wife and our newborn were there too. They left early with my in-laws. I stayed behind and slid into a drunken, intoxicated mess. A cousin pressed a small bag of powder into my hand, and I spent the afternoon taking it line by line in a public bathroom with another cousin. By the time evening came, I was a mess. Loud, grandiose, stripped of any brake pedal. Rye picked me up after dark and drove me to a place near the water. At some point, I ended up skinny dipping, a clown performing for whoever was watching. He took me back to the granny flat he used to live in, and I passed out on his couch, a parody of myself, intoxicated, chaotic, ridiculous. In his mind, that's Andrew letting go, the wild version of me that comes out when I'm partying. In mine, that night has become one of the clearest proofs that I don't know how to regulate anything, emotion, shame, fear, without blasting myself out of my own body. So when he suggests the lake in Jindabyne, he thinks he's offering me something I like. I hear something else entirely, an invitation to become that man again. I don't have the words for any of this, so I just wince and shake my head and let him think I'm being difficult. The truth is, I don't know who I am in Jindabyne yet. I just know that the man who stripped off and stumbled into the water that night is not who I want to be anymore. And that all my training, my driving, my early morning music in the dark is a frantic attempt to build a different version of myself from scratch. Rye sits in the middle of all this without realizing it. He's the one who drove down to support the triathlon, the one who has stood beside me in saunas and ice baths, the one who will later transfer money to cover my fines, the one who still talks to my wife when she can't face me. In Jindabyne, he thinks we're just having a boys' trip. I'm using him as a kind of human bridge between the life I'm shredding and the life I'm trying, badly, to invent. And even in my worst moments, he keeps treating me as someone worth investing in. Conversations on the balcony. The days in Jindabyne blur into a pattern that looks simple from the outside. Balcony, kitchen, short walks into town. The three of us drifting in and out of each other's company. Inside my head, it's anything but simple. I'm still running at a 7 or 8 most of the time. The noise is constant. Money, letters of demand, Auto Street, the family, the church. There's always a speech forming in the back of my throat. The balcony is where things start to loosen. It's small, with a view over the water and the hills. The kind of view estate agents use as a selling point. To me, it feels more like a stage. I keep taking my phone out, framing shots, catching Gabbie in these strange, tender poses. Balaclava on, arms raised, plastic cup in hand, shouting something half-serious into the thin air. He's playing indestructible idiot for the camera, and somehow also showing me how fragile he is. We lean on the railing and talk in bursts, not about mental health in any clean way, but about the things men like us talk about when we don't have any other language. Cousins, jobs, money that never arrives, deals that go sideways. In the city, those conversations always seem to snap shut. Here they stretch a little. At one point, he tells me about a scaffolding job where a cousin ripped him off. The story is almost a mirror of what I've been living through with my own family. Someone you trust promises money, there's a delay, there's another promise, then suddenly the tone changes and you're left short. He tells it quickly, but when he gets to the part where the cousin hands over less than he owes, he stops and looks out over the lake. He says he cried when it happened. Not out of self-pity, but because he was already on the edge, and this was one more reminder that even your own can treat you as disposable. My manic brain pounces on the injustice. In my head, I'm already slotting his story into my map. Evidence that this is how our family is. Another exhibit in the case against everyone. He doesn't frame it that way. He's hurt, but he refuses to turn it into a courtroom. He doesn't start naming everyone evil. He stays closer to something like, this was wrong, and it broke my heart, and I'm still here. That difference is small on paper and enormous in life. Later, sitting on the same balcony, we talk about Mark and his father. This is a conversation I've been rehearsing without him for months. I come in hot, full of simple moral categories. A man takes his wife's life and her brother's in a single night. Therefore he is a monster. Therefore anyone who stands by him is complicit. It's a clean story, and I've been clinging to clean stories like that to make sense of my own rage. Gabbie doesn't argue the facts. He doesn't pretend what happened was anything less than horrific. But when he speaks about Mark's father, the center of gravity is somewhere else entirely. He keeps coming back to the same phrase, that he respects Simon, Eid, not because what happened was acceptable or small, but because, as he sees it, even a father who has done the unthinkable is still a father, and as Christians, you are compelled to hold on to some thread of love and forgiveness. He talks about how much Mark has carried, how loyal he's been, how he still honors his father, not in spite of what happened, but in defiance of the part of the world that would tell him to cut that tie completely. At the time, I hear all of this, and I see nothing but evil in Simon. And I pour that evil onto Mark and his extended family, without knowing them or their story at all, just on the strength of a few offhand things Yusuf said back in April, filtered through a brain already in full manic flight. In those conversations, I don't suddenly become enlightened. I argue back. I push. I tell myself he's being naive. Inside, though, something is being nudged that was already there before the mania took over. The sense that there has to be a way of living with horror and betrayal that doesn't involve turning everyone into defendants and myself into a permanent prosecutor. I don't have access to that way of living yet. I'm still deep in the performance of righteous anger. But sitting there with him, with Rye drifting in and out, there are brief moments where I remember that the best men in my family have always carried pain differently, not by pretending it doesn't hurt, but by refusing to let that hurt be the only truth about a person. Rye hovers through these days like a quieter satellite. He comes out onto the balcony, laughs at the right moments, takes photos, suggests walks, suggests food. Every now and then he will throw in something practical. Let's swim later. Let's eat something decent. You need to sleep. He is doing what he has always done with me, nudging my body back into the picture. When I get too far into my head, into my monologues, he'll break the spell with something completely ordinary. Come on, let's go grab a coffee. Let's check the water. It's a small act, but when you're at an 8, someone pulling you back towards the physical world like that can feel like the difference between spinning off and staying tethered. At night, after they've gone to bed, I go back to the laptop. I listen to little loops I've made earlier in the day, beats and chords stitched together while the others were talking. I start to see how these sounds might one day sit under images. Gabbie on the balcony, the lake in the background, the road curling away towards the mountains. I'm already thinking in edits, in cuts, in overlays. On the surface, that looks like creativity. In reality, it's also a survival tactic. If I can turn these days into scenes, I can stand to be inside them. If I can imagine a future version of me crafting this into something beautiful, then maybe I'm not just a man who screams into his phone about his family. None of this makes me less manic in the moment. I still send messages dripping with accusation. I still fantasize about confrontations and reckonings. I still rehearse speeches that feel like closing arguments. But Jindabyne does something I don't fully grasp yet. It gives me a counter-image. When I think about that period now, I don't just see the rage videos and the legal threats. I see Gabbie in a balaclava on a balcony, Rye shivering beside me in cold water, the three of us around a table with too much food, and the strange fact that, for a handful of days, two men who were already exhausted by their own lives still chose to make room for mine. The pork belly dinner, the pink jumper, and Fred's chicken shop. That night in Jindabyne, I tried to prove to myself more than anyone else that I could still be useful. Gabbie's apartment is small, but the view and the details make it feel larger than it is. The balcony looking out over the lake, the big framed print of Pshari in winter on the brick wall, the warm little kitchen with exposed brick. I move around that space in my bright pink jumper like I'm running a one-man restaurant service. Pork belly in the oven, mash on the stove, Brussels sprouts in a pan. It's domestic theater. On one level, I'm just making dinner for my cousin and my brother-in-law. Underneath, I'm trying to prove that I can still be the man who feeds people, not just the man who screams into microphones. At some point while I'm cooking, Gabbie pulls out his phone and starts filming. I lean into it straight away. I stand at the bench with a bottle of amaretto, a bottle of Coke, and a lime and announce, half serious, half performing, that I'm going to show him how to make his drink. I talk it through like a YouTube tutorial. Amaretto with a slice of lime, a splash of Coke, and the secret, plenty, plenty, plenty of ice. I repeat the phrase like a punchline, overfilling the glass with cubes until it looks more like a sculpture than a drink. I pour far too much amaretto and hardly any Coke, and Gabbie says off camera, "That's my kind of drink." I finish with a little toast. Cheers for Gabbie. Nothing about that moment looks sick. If you freeze the frame, it's just a man in a pink jumper, grinning, making a fancy drink for his cousin in a warm kitchen. But it is one of the clearest glimpses of the light side of my mania. All that energy channeled into service and performance instead of accusation. I'm making dinner and mixing cocktails because I don't know how else to show love. I can't regulate my moods. I can't stop the legal and family machinery grinding away back in Sydney. But I can stand here and overfill a glass with ice and amaretto and pretend that for one night, I am the generous host and not the walking mess. Later, we sit down to eat. The three of us around the table could pass in a still photograph for an ordinary evening between relatives. Rai is there in the way he's always been there for me, the quiet, practical one who wires me money when I'm short, who takes me to saunas and ice baths, who believes stubbornly that the right mix of heat and cold and exercise might help pull me back to myself. Gabbie is at the other side of the table, still in that strange space of being both deeply unwell and deeply caring. I watch them eat and feel just for a while that I've done something right. Inside, the noise doesn't disappear, but it softens. The dial drops. Not calm, but reachable. Cooking for them, handing Gabbie that overflowing glass, listening to them talk, I feel like a cousin and a brother-in-law instead of a walking mess. After dinner, when the plates are pushed back and the apartment has that comfortable mess of empty glasses and scraped dishes, Gabbie pulls his phone out again, not to film this time, but to show me something. It's the chicken shop clip. Anthony Rahile in Irvine, California, interviewing our cousin Fred in his spotless shop. Fred in his apron, talking about brining and avocado oil and hospitality, saying, "Ana Fred Taouk Men Bishari." We're in a little unit in Jindabyne with a picture of Bishari on the wall, watching another Taouk from Bishari serve perfect charcoal chicken in America. On the surface, it is just three men watching a successful relative on YouTube. Underneath, my brain is stitching symbols together at high speed. Shari on the wall, Shari on the screen. A cousin turning our surname and our village into a brand of warmth and competence. A line of customers out the door. In my manic logic, it becomes proof that my own frantic project, the podcasts, the videos, the music, isn't worthless. If Fred can turn our story into something that feeds people, maybe I can too. For Gabbie, the meaning is different. I can see it in the way he watches the screen. Pride, yes, but also a quiet ache. Fred is what we might have been in another life. Stable, admired, filmed by a food celebrity instead of being a mockery. The gap between the bright tiled shop in Irvine and the cramped unit in Jindabyne hangs there in the air, unspoken. I don't have language for any of this while I'm there. All I know is that the combination of those small acts, cooking the meal, making the drink, raising a glass to Gabbie, watching Fred's chicken shop, makes something in me unclench. For a few hours, the world is reduced to a simple triangle. One cousin filming, one cousin cooking, one brother-in-law trying to keep everyone upright. The same manic energy that back in Sydney is spilling out as bile and accusations on YouTube is here being used to season pork, to overfill a glass with ice, to imagine how a short clip from a chicken shop could be turned into a song. Later, when I take the raw footage and build the chicken shop remix out of it, I'll see this night more clearly. The pink jumper, the plenty of ice joke, the toast to Gabbie that now feels like a tiny accidental eulogy. At the time, I just feel, rare for that year, almost present. The quiet day, snow, driving, and Gabbie box of memories. The next morning in Jindabyne starts long before anyone else is awake. The unit is dark and cold. The only light is the blue wash from my laptop screen. I plug in the little MIDI keyboard I've dragged down with me and start building these slow, melodic, spacious tracks. Long-held chords, gentle melodic lines, lots of air and reverb. It isn't about clever loops or beats. It's about trying to stretch one calm feeling out as far as it will go, filling the room with something softer than the noise in my head. When the first sketch of a piece feels vaguely soothing, I close the laptop, grab my keys and my medical vaporizer, and slip out. The Tesla becomes another sort of cocoon. I drive the same road I rode in the triathlon months earlier, climbing out of town toward Threadbow, taking measured draws on prescribed THC and letting that medicated calm spread through my chest. The sky is low and gray, and then suddenly, it isn't just cold, it's snowing, properly snowing, thick flakes drifting across the windscreen. It was out of season. To anyone else, it was a weather anomaly. To me, it was cinematic direction. God was dressing the set for my scene. I filmed through the windscreen as the Alpine road winds ahead, gums and guardrails half vanishing in the white. For a little while, it's just tires on wet bitumen, heater on my feet, ambient music still playing through the speakers, and this impossible snow. The euphoria of driving is real, but it sits on top of something brittle. I'm alone in the car, riding a THC-assisted calm that can't quite reach whatever is churning underneath. By the time I roll back into Jindabyne, it is still early. Gabbie is up, and the day shifts into something more ordinary. He's stressed about money and wants to get the unit ready for a real estate inspection. Renting the place out is one of the few options he can see. We move through the rooms together with brooms and cloths, clearing surfaces, shaking out dusty rugs, trying to turn a bachelor crash pad into something that looks like a holiday rental. It's mundane work, but it's also quietly intimate. Two cousins moving in parallel, not saying much, scraping a life into order. That night, after we've eaten at Banjo Patterson's and come back full and tired, the mood softens further. Out on the outdoor stairs, I stop them for a photo. Gabbie in his red Heavenly California hoodie, vape in hand, hood up against the cold. Rye a few steps above him, half lit by the yellow security lights, checking his phone. In the frame, they look like two different versions of the same role in my life, cousin and brother-in-law, both trying in their own way to keep me tethered. And I'm the one behind the camera, trying to fix that feeling in pixels. Inside, Gabbie goes hunting through a box of keepsakes and spreads them across the kitchen bench. There's a glossy print of Fred driving in America, taken from the passenger seat. Red jacket, focused expression, snow smearing past the window. Next to it, he lays out three smaller photos. Fred and Gabbie together in U.S. winter light, and two close-ups of Fred on his own. They're ordinary snapshots, but in Gabbie's hands, there's something else. Proof that he once had a season of life that felt clear and hopeful. Then he produces a narrow photo booth strip from my wedding. 3 frames of him and our cousin Louis from Crisso Civil pulling faces under the booth's harsh flash, with Emily and Andrew and little florals printed along the edge. I'd forgotten those pictures existed. He'd kept them for years. Taken together, the Threadbow snow through the windscreen, the cleaning day, the pub dinner, the stairway vape shot, The America photos, the wedding strip, they form a kind of accidental triptych. Gabbie as he once was, Gabbie as he is now, and me trying to stand somewhere between those two versions, making ambient tracks on a cheap keyboard, driving alone through out-of-season snow, then coming back inside to wash dishes and listen to his stories. Jindabyne still isn't the miracle cure I'm secretly chasing, but in these small, ordinary scenes, there is a kind of treatment underway. A cousin letting me into his past, a friend holding space for me in his present, and the beginnings of a grief I don't yet know I'm going to have to carry. The Chicken Shop remix. The drive back to Sydney is long and gray. Rye has the wheel because my license is suspended. Gabbie is in the back seat, and I sit in the passenger side watching the lake and the highway unspool. The noise in my head is quieter than it was on the way down, but it's still there, now layered with something new. The feeling that I don't want this car ride, or this weekend, to end. We drop Gabbie at his parents' place in Greenacre. Rye pulls up out the front, and the two of them climb out first. I stay in the car, half frozen between going down to say a proper goodbye and keeping my distance. Instead, I hold up my phone and capture 4 seconds. Rye and Gabbie walking away from me toward the house. At the time, it's just another compulsive recording. Later, it becomes the last moving image I have of him, alive. On the way from Greenacre back toward Rye's place, the police pull us over. They tell us the registration has been expired for months. I'm suddenly grateful that Rye is the one driving. If I'd been behind the wheel, with THC in my system and a suspended license, the night could have ended very differently. After they leave, Rye orders a taxi to get himself home. I take the car, drive to my wife's place to see her and the kids, then keep driving alone. That restless, manic circuit continues for weeks, driving simply because stopping feels impossible. And when a police officer asks me in early December why I've been on the road so much, I tell him the truth. I just couldn't stop. Back home, the Jindabyne trip condenses itself into objects on the kitchen bench. Gabbie has sent me photos over WhatsApp and handed me others from his box of keepsakes. I lay them out under the kitchen light. Glossy prints of Fred in America. One of him driving with snow streaking past the window. Another of him standing on a street somewhere overseas. And a photo where he and Gabbie are together, younger and lighter, captured in that particular mix of pride and mischief that runs through our family. Nearby sits the old photograph of our fathers and uncles in the late 70s or early 80s, crowded around a table loaded with Lebanese meze and KB beer, frozen mid-toast, full of a kind of rough joy that feels almost mythical now. Among the photos is the strip from my wedding photo booth. It's a narrow white strip with 3 frames. In each frame, it's just Gabbie and Louis, no one else. In the first shot, Gabbie leans in toward Louis, who is looking down at his phone. In the second and third, they stand shoulder to shoulder, half serious, half smirking at the camera, like two cousins playing at being movie stars. Along the right edge runs a floral border with dark red and soft pink blooms. And in script it reads, Emily and Andrew, with the date of our wedding beneath. Gabbie has kept this strip for years, tucked away in his box, and now he presses it into my hands, as if to say, remember that. For all the chaos, there was a time when we were simply happy for you. On my laptop, I open the original Chicken Shop video that Gabbie showed me in Jindabyne. The shaky phone clip Anthony Rahael filmed of Fred at the counter of a suburban chicken shop. Fluorescent light, tiled walls, stainless steel trays, the ordinary background noise of fryers and chatter. Fred is clowning and talking fast. Anthony's voice comes in and out behind the camera, and the whole thing is rough, affectionate, working-class Lebanese Sydney. When Gabbie first played it for me, he was beaming, proud in a way that said, these are our people, this is our world. The remix grows out of that feeling. Late at night, after the kids are asleep, I download the clip and begin to cut it up. I slow sections down, repeat small gestures, let Fred's movements breathe. Over the top I lay Once a Shoemaker by the Danish String Quartet, a piece of music that is all ache and tenderness, strings opening out into something wider than either of us could ever say out loud. As the music swells, I start dropping in the still images. Fred driving through the snow in America, Fred and Gabbie overseas, the photo booth strip of Gabbie and Louie, the old table shot of our fathers and uncles raising their glasses. These images don't just decorate the video, they speak to it, turning a throwaway YouTube clip into a small private liturgy for the men in our family. The work is meticulous and obsessive. I'm vaping my prescribed cannabis, riding that narrow band of calm and soft euphoria it gives me, and for a while, the manic pressure drops from an 8 down to something closer to a 5. I'm still unwell, still wired, but for the length of the piece, 4 minutes, 5 minutes, the noise in my head organizes itself into rhythm and melody. I'm not making content. I'm building a kind of prayer, frame by frame, for a cousin who understands me, for a friend of his I never really knew, and for a line of fathers and sons who keep hurting each other and loving each other anyway. When I finish the Chicken Shop remix, it doesn't feel like a clever edit, so much as a small, clumsy prayer stitched out of other people's images. The original clip Gabbie showed me, Anthony, Rahael, and Fred working the counter at the little chicken shop, sits at the center. Around it, I layer the things he handed me in Jindabyne. The photo booth strip from my wedding, where he and Louie lean into each other under the floral border, with Emily and Andrew printed on the side. The snapshots of Fred driving in America, with snow blurring past the window. The old party photograph of our fathers and uncles crowded around a table, loaded with messe and KB cans. Set against the Danish String Quartet's Once a Shoemaker, the whole thing becomes less about the shop itself and more about what Gabbie was trying to show me when he first pressed play in the lounge room. Loyalty, humor, and a stubborn tenderness that survives bad decisions, distance, and time. Looking back now, what moves me most is that I could see those same qualities in him. The way he loved our people, quietly and without much to show for it. And the remix was my way of trying to honor that, even if I didn't yet understand how much it would come to mean. False spring. In the weeks after Jindabyne, I become convinced that the worst is behind me. I call it spring in my head, as if the season has changed inside my chest. The language comes out fully formed in one of the videos I make for Andrew Tauk's swim club, a 4-minute piece I title Hope in Spring After Harsh Winter. The harsh winter is everything from Tony's death through to Jindabyne, the funeral I couldn't face, the hospital, the family war, the hours alone in the car, rehearsing arguments that never end. Spring is what I want to believe this new phase is, cleaner, lighter, cured. On screen, I sound calm and composed. I talk about having survived something terrible and about rebuilding through swimming, routine, and discipline. The swim club name, which started as a manic brand idea, now feels like a rehabilitation program I'm running on myself. The water becomes proof that I'm not drowning anymore. I am the director of my own recovery, the proprietor of a tiny private clinic that exists in my head and on YouTube. The music I make for myself in this period tells a different story. It's long, spacious, melodic pieces, pads that swell and thin out, slow piano figures, ambient textures that hover and don't quite resolve. When I sit at the keyboard in the dark, I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm trying to find a sound that feels like breathing. For a few minutes at a time, these pieces bring the mood down from an 8 to something closer to a 5. Not well, just quiet enough that I can sit still. That's what spring really is here. Short clearings in the weather, not a new climate. In Hope in Spring After Harsh Winter, I talk as if the clearing is permanent. I frame June to September as a completed chapter, the winter that nearly killed me, and October as the rebirth. I present the swim routines, the cold water, the new habits, as if they have solved the underlying problem. Watching it back now, the whole piece feels like a textbook pink cloud, genuine relief and gratitude, but built on the fantasy that the illness is finished with me. Running underneath the hopeful narration is a more complicated current. Even in this recovery video, there are flashes of the same driving obsessions: family, justice, money, legacy. Only now they're dressed up in therapeutic language. I talk about curses being broken, about the family winter being over, about finally stepping into the life I was meant to live. The rage has been repackaged as purpose. The fear has been rebadged as clarity. The mood is still high. A few days later, I make I Love You, Tony, which functions like the emotional twin of the spring video. Where Hope in Spring is a manifesto, the Tony piece is an elegy. I speak directly to my cousin as if he can still hear me. I try to stitch together guilt, admiration, and grief into something coherent. The swim club branding appears again, but now it feels less like a clinic and more like a chapel. The water is not just exercise, it's where I go to talk to the dead. Taken together, these two works show the split I'm living inside. On the surface, I'm narrating recovery, a man who has come through a harsh season and is now choosing life, discipline, and faith. Underneath, I'm still oscillating between rage, despair, and idealization, using music and video as scaffolding to hold myself up. The spring I announce so confidently is real in the sense that I do feel lighter, more organized, more hopeful. It is false in the sense that nothing fundamental has settled. The pressure in my head hasn't gone. It has just learned new, more polished ways to speak. From the outside, this phase could easily be mistaken for genuine stability. I'm swimming, creating, talking about hope, talking about love for Tony, instead of only anger at everyone who hurt him. To anyone who doesn't know the full archive, it would look like a man on the mend. Inside, the weather is still unstable. The videos and the ambient tracks are my way of trying to hold the barometer steady, to force the season to change by naming it spring. For a little while, it almost works. The day I heard Gabbie was gone, I'm leaving my wife's place when I find out Gabbie is dead. I'm in that strange in-between space I lived in for most of that year. Not quite a husband anymore, not quite a stranger either. I say goodbye to the kids, step out onto the street, order a rideshare, and sit in the back, already half in my head, half somewhere else. My phone rings. It's my cousin Zuzu. He doesn't ease into it. There's this quick, nervous little preface that lands exactly in the language I've been using online. I'm going to tell you something, but you have to promise not to have a panic attack. It's clumsy and sharp at the same time. He's younger than me. He's watched some of my videos, heard me talk about panic attacks, and he thinks he's meeting me where I am. It comes from a place of respect and affection, but it cuts. Then he tells me, Gabbie is dead. My mind does something very simple and very cruel. It tries to make a version of reality where he can't be talking about that Gabbie. Which Gabbie? There's a pause, then his tone hardens, like he thinks I'm joking or being difficult. In that beat, I already know. There is only one Gabbie that could possibly mean this much to both of us. He clarifies, but he doesn't need to. The sentence has already landed. My brain is just refusing to register it. I hang up and sit with the flatness that follows. It isn't numbness exactly. It's more like someone has unplugged something vital between my thoughts and my chest. Everything feels far away and too close at the same time. I call my wife. I repeat what I've just been told. Her reaction is immediate: shock, concern, a kind of emotional clarity I don't have access to. I hear myself saying the same words over and over. I can't believe it. It can't be. At some point, tears come. They don't feel connected to any coherent thought. They're just there, running down my face, while I try not to fall apart in front of other people. Eventually, I get home. The rest of the day moves in slow, heavy pieces. I walk into my office, the room that has become the control panel for all of it. Voice memos, YouTube episodes, affidavits, music. I vape my prescribed THC, trying to take the sharp edge off the news, trying to manufacture some kind of calm because I don't know what else to do. Underneath all of that is a simpler, more painful truth. The person who felt like hope to me in that period, someone who came to see me when others wouldn't, who understood the particular kind of brokenness we shared, is gone. It lands in the same part of me that Tony's death did. Another cousin, another piece of hope disappearing. A part of me wants to just surrender to that, to let it confirm the picture I've already been painting of the world as cruel and fixed and doomed. Another part of me refuses. I don't have words for that refusal yet. It's just a low, stubborn resistance somewhere under the grief. That night, my brother Eddie sends me a voice message. I don't listen to it straight away. I'm exhausted. I fall asleep with my phone nearby, the way I always do. When I wake in the early hours and finally press play, what I hear is love, clumsily translated into images I wish I could unhear. He's trying to comfort me, to speak into the loss, but he reaches for the most brutal, literal language. How Gabbie was found, what death can do to a body, a line about worms and eyes that feels like it burns itself directly into my imagination. On some level, I understand what he's reaching for. We're similar in more ways than either of us would like to admit. Trauma, being cast out, trying to make sense of cruelty by staring straight at it. He's using the only tools he has, but hearing it in that moment feels like an act of accidental cruelty. I appreciate that he's thinking of me. I can also feel myself recoiling. For the rest of that day, the image won't leave. I try to move through the hours, vaping, pacing, half working, half scrolling, but it sits there, heavy and lodged, threatening to become the final picture my mind holds of Gabbie. Not his laugh, not his kindness, not Jindabyne or the drive, or the stupid Kmart shirts, but a grotesque snapshot of his last moments. I don't have a clear plan. No neat decision, no heroic vow. What I do have is a growing sense that I can't let that be the thing that sticks. I can feel the anger and sorrow mixing, a kind of desperate insistence that this is not who he was to me, that this cannot be the symbol I'm left with. On this day, though, it's still mostly darkness. The call from Zuzu, my wife's voice, the flatness, Eddie's message, that horrible image looping in the background. Somewhere underneath, very faintly, something in me is starting to push back, even if I don't yet know what form that will take. Elegy for Gabbie. The afternoon feels wrong in my body. Not sharp, not dramatic, just heavy and off-center, like the day is leaning to one side and I can't quite stand straight in it. I've already had the news. I've already done the call where I say, "Which Gabbie?" as if there might be another one. I've already heard my wife's voice crack on the other end of the line. I've already woken in the dark and listened to my brother's message, heard the way he tries to comfort me in the only language he knows, by telling me something brutal and unforgettable about death that he thinks will help me face it. Now it's later, sometime after all that, and everything has settled into a kind of sick, humming stillness. The shock has worn off, just enough to let the images through. I move around the house like I'm walking underwater. I vape because that's what I do. Prescribed THC to shave a bit off the edges, but it doesn't change the fact that inside I'm stuck with two competing truths. Gabbie is gone, and the last picture my brain wants to play of him is something grotesque and wrong that someone else put there. There's nothing to do with that. I can't go to his bedside. I can't go back to Jindabyne. I can't call him. The only thing that even vaguely makes sense to me is the one thing that has made any sense all year. Go to the keyboard. I don't sit there and say, "Right, now I will compose an elegy to overwrite this image." I'm not that coherent. I'm just a man who has been turning everything into sound for months. Rage, paranoia, hope, theology, family drama. And now grief arrives, and my nervous system reaches for the same tool. If I can't think my way through this, maybe I can play my way through it. So I go into the little room that has become the command center for my madness. Laptop, MIDI keyboard, headphones, the same cheap mic I've used for all the other pieces. Afternoon light coming in at the wrong angle, too bright for how I feel. My hands know where to go before my mind does. I open the software, load a piano, and start building something that feels like the opposite of the noise in my head. Slow, spacious, melodic. That's the kind of music I've been teaching myself to make. Not loops, not big choruses, just long-held chords and small motifs with enough air around them that I can breathe inside the sound. A sort of ambient scaffold that can hold whatever feeling I can't name yet. As the first chords ring out, I can feel myself drop half a notch on the internal mood scale. Still high, still wired, but not as jagged. Maybe an 8 sliding toward a 5 for as long as the notes sustain. At first, it's just that. Hands moving, chords shifting, something gentle and sad taking shape. Then the words start to arrive, almost by accident. I hear myself talking to him out loud, and because everything in my life is wired into recording now, that talking ends up on the track. I'm not planning verses. I'm not crafting lines. I'm sobbing and speaking and playing at the same time, trying to keep the sound going so I don't have to fall through the silence. Underneath all of it, that other image is still there, the one my brother gave me. He meant well, I know that. He tried to share something that had lodged in his own mind, some horrible line that he and Gabbie once laughed about in another context, thinking it might shock me into acceptance. Instead, it just sits there like a curse, this crude, insect-ridden picture of what happens to a body after it has stopped being a person. I can feel how angry and hurt I am about that, even if I wouldn't have put it into words then. We're both traumatized men from the same family, both doing our best with blunt tools. But the net effect is that on the day after my cousin's death, the symbol that wants to stick is one of decay and humiliation. Something in me refuses that, not in a heroic cinematic way, more in a stubborn, childlike one. No, that's not going to be the last frame I keep of him. The music becomes my way of arguing with that image without having to say so. Every chord I hold is me trying to remember the Gabbie who drove to my house when nobody else would. The cousin who watched my YouTube episodes and heard past the mania to the pain underneath. The man who met me in Jindabyne, shared stories of being ripped off, and still somehow spoke about respect and forgiveness. As I play, I'm trying to let that version of him take up more space than the horror my brother accidentally handed me. By the time I stop, my face is wet and my arms feel hollow. I listen back once, just to check that it's real, that it actually happened and isn't another manic fantasy. There's the piano, wide and slow. There's my voice, cracked and messy, talking to him as if he might still be somewhere on the other side of the speakers. It isn't polished. It isn't clever. It's barely even music in any formal sense. But it's true to the moment in a way nothing else that day has been. At some point, I give the file a name that will stick. Elegy for Gabbie. I'm not thinking about how it will sound in a book, or how a psychologist might read the gesture, or how it will look to a judge or a priest or anyone else. I'm just trying to pin down in sound a version of him I can live with. Something I can hold in my head that isn't clinical or grotesque or secondhand. The grief isn't resolved when I hit save. The horrible image my brother planted hasn't vanished. But now it has company. Now when I think of Gabbie, there is also this slow, aching piece of music. This strange mix of melody and broken speech that came out of me when I couldn't do anything else. From the outside, it still looks like more content. Another file on a hard drive, another track in a folder. From the inside, it's a small, stubborn act of refusal. I can't change the way he died. I can't change the things that were said to me about it. What I can do in this hazy, destabilized afternoon is sit at a keyboard and carve out a different symbol, something beautiful enough, however delusional, to stand in front of the horror and say quietly but firmly, no, this is who he was to me. He represented a safe harbor for just a fleeting moment, like a candle in an abyss that was slowly warming and illuminating the things around it. And then the candle was wiped out.